listening to the 6th episode of the Pseud podcast. I'm your host, Teapot, and today I got with me Maestro and a guest, AndGeo, for the second time. Alright, today we're talking about art. And what better art piece to discuss than the very, very recently released, perhaps a little bit tacky, a little buggy, and perhaps a little overhyped. I don't know because I haven't played the game yet, but Cyberpunk 2077. Does it live up to the hype, lads?
Whoa. We went in here raw fish. We didn't even say. They're like, come on, let's hope you enjoy the episode, people. But okay, let's enter it. Okay, this is full Pseud Central style. We enter it raw, full raw. Teapot was very excited to start the episode. Since I kept him away, it was a racially exclusive episode, the last one. So no, but jumping to Cyberpunk, I would say that from what I've seen, I haven't played it myself, but it's a whole lot of cyber and nothing punk, so to speak. It looks cool. It has its fancy graphics, but it brings nothing to the table, which I expected. Okay, I was disappointed, but I expected that it's not going to bring anything new to the table. There's no paradigm shifts in gameplay. They followed a bit the tradition which they started with. Which they achieved with The Witcher 3, which was the refinement of the open world formula, and they tried to do so again. So the game feels a bit outdated in my view, because it already tries to refine what was already refined with The Witcher 3. Though it tries to go the more RPG pure route style rather than action RPG. But so far, the art direction is pretty cool, I have to say. But as an art piece in video game, which I consider it under, so to speak, different parameters rather than your traditional pieces of art, because gameplay for me is a piece of art. It's not spectacular. It's your average AAA title. Lots of fanfare, and that's it.
So the thing is that Cyberpunk 2077 is, I think it tries very hard to be Grand Theft Auto, right? Like first person Grand Theft Auto, and does not do that very well. I think if you compare it with that, it kind of fails gameplay wise in some respects. But if you compare it to other like first person RPGs like Fallout, it's still a pretty strong title. I have to admit though that there's these scenes with these like custom made animations, and they're amazing. Oh, no. Like there's some, they're really good, really good. Okay. And there's these moments where the game really shines on a technical level. But yeah, we get a lot of kind of rehashed Neuromancer plus a bunch of other stuff. Okay. So far, I'm not as cynical as the people on Twitter that I don't think have played the game at all and are calling it like not punk at all.
Yeah. You put me as a Twitter person.
I'm not talking about you, but you also haven't played it. Just to be clear.
Yeah, but okay, let's put it, because I say it this way, because for me, by itself, punk is dead. Cyberpunk is dead as a movement, so to speak, as an artistic, and what we're now feeding is essentially the corpse of it, or using the fancy pants term, the hauntology of Cyberpunk, which by itself was a hauntology, sort of. So we are like double think, big brain stuff.
I mean, it's literally nostalgia for the future. Like it has all like the nostalgic, like kind of. Either way, it's true. The point that you brought up It's more Cyberpunk itself that has died out. I think it was Jugopnik that kind of mentioned that. Like, why do Cyberpunk content hot takes feel like Joker hot takes back in the day, done by people who haven't even watched the movie? Not saying criticism is faulty, it was just a bit hyper rushed. Well, the thing is, right, so what separates a sloppy release or like an overhyped release, like what was that game called again? Not Outer Worlds, the like super overhyped game that you could travel across.
No Man's Sky?
No Man's Sky. Yeah. Like that was obviously a flop at the start. Now it's a pretty good game. But like this, from what I understand, it plays pretty well. It's just that it has all these kinds of horrible bugs and some not so woke takes on like how to dress your character. I want to really highlight that point though, because like you said, Maestro, it's very much RPG in their traditional sense. It's just like you can literally decide the size of your penis. Like nudity is one of the hallmarks of the game, and there's this bug that makes it so that you see the penis sometimes even when you have clothes on, and it's just like, how do you fuck that up? Especially after they delayed the game after a month, you would think that they would fix something like that.
I mean, look at it it is a point which Geo will strangle me with, but look at the point of for example, the works of the Renaissance masters, and then what came after, the people that tried to copy them. Okay, or look at for example, the paintings of the period in which there was like Giotto and the whole medieval period, and you had like a slew of really good artists, but the majority of the works, it's mediocre stuff. It's in the normalcy. Even with big works from big artists, you had this sort of issues. Even certain paintings from big names, you look at them and you think, did he really made that? I mean, did you ever had that sensation, Gio? When looking at the painting and thinking, did that guy actually do that? Did that guy actually waste years and years and came out with his,
Specifically with Cyberpunk, or are you asking about
art, painting? No, specifically the painting.
Well, because you mentioned Renaissance masters, right? And I don't want to scrutinize them too harshly because they came out of like this medieval tradition and did innovate in like some really great ways. But when you look at a lot of Renaissance art and compare it to later realism, for example, right, or like Caravaggio or Velázquez, the later works, right, the Baroque, generally just looks better, right? Like,
no, but
even
like
though
from a single artist, okay, take a single artist, and when you think about him, about his reputation, and then there is a particular work, when you look at that work and you think how he did that, why, like that's not so him, in regards to quality.
God, I mean, I'm sure it has happened.
Everyone has
many
their
times,
doubts,
but at the same time, I can't give you an example right now. I think the one thing that comes close to that is like the entire thing Rothko is like famous for, right? His abstract paintings, which apparently was just a thing that he pumped out because he was. I'm not super knowledgeable about Rothko. I should say this is not something that or listeners should take as gospel truth, right? But as far as I know, it was just something that he did just as a thing, right? Let me paint some shit, and people really liked it, so he went really ham with it, really like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do for the rest of my career.
Or even if though it's subjective, you would think technically speaking is also subjective. But for example, the switch that Picasso did from his younger period painting, the realistic ones, towards the cubism, a lot of people are just looking at it how this is not about quality, but unexpected switches of style or radical switches of style you have. You see, kids, you listening to us, what we did here is basic bitch art analysis, which can work both in video games and in art, so and in traditional art. So you see, it's equivalent. Or music. Okay, let's go Teapot, because since you're knowledgeable with music, okay, you have artists which produced constantly good albums, stuff that you can feel reliant, then they produce a dud. I think it's countless examples of that.
Dude, I have a rant about this on my blog. In the side notes, I talk about how a lot of these bands, like Deftones, I was going to bring up an example of this radical shift from it's a 20-year anniversary of their master, magnum opus, fucking White Pony. And they call it Black Stallion, and they have these remixes on the other side of the albums. It's a double album, and it's just they take the songs, and it's not even the songs anymore. It's just they sample some vocal line and turn it into an electronic song, and it's I think it's good. It's just totally 180 from what the average Deftones listener was listening to. And what I would do in a situation like that is well, are you going to dismiss great artists because they do one mistake according to you? And should they take notice from that? Should they learn from that? They cannot make mistakes, because a lot of the times, right? A lot of artists, they write maybe 30 songs and they release 10 songs. Deftones is not a band like that. They write 10 songs and then they release those 10 songs. And I've had people say well, they just throw stuff on the wall and see what happens. It's no, not really. They do stuff they think is good, and then they release it. And it's just not maybe what a producer would always do. If you go to a random metal producer, it's because they do it their own way. And it's does that make it less quality? And if it does make it less quality, would you complain if they would be people like this song, but we don't like it, so we're not going to publish it? Where's the consistency in all these criticisms? I don't really understand how an artist is supposed to interpret that.
One artist, because now that we're talking about music, there is one artist where that's a very prevalent thing. This not just a shift in style, but also in quality, arguably, right? And that's Eminem, right?
Yeah.
Who is considered probably, you could put him on every fucking GOAT list a decade ago, but nowadays that's a lot tougher to do, right? And the worst part about it is that his more recent records, not that they're all bad, but
no.
Or all the tracks are bad, but you can tell that he did a stylistic change, right? And it's a thing that you can see over years, right? So this is a thing that he said, okay, I want to rap this way now, and I'm going to stick to it. But it kind of sucks, bro. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he started doing really fast raps with hundreds of bars, but it's just I don't know, it feels kind of forced again. That's the problem.
Yeah. Nowadays, I wouldn't say that he goes for the speed anymore. He goes more for sometimes, right? Tracks like sometimes. Rap God, but Rap God also doesn't fall into that.
Godzilla too.
Yeah, but it doesn't fall into that stuttery style, I guess, that he does nowadays, style, exactly. Which he used to never do.
That's true.
But it's a thing that he stuck to. Yeah,
change,
I mean, at the same time, a lot of his discography of his early cuts, right? It's just good music that, considering the edginess of it all, has aged pretty well. I'll say.
Actually,
I'm sure that if we took 10 other random rappers and they did the same style of edgy rap that Eminem does, Eminem would have aged better than at least 9 of them.
Yeah,
I mean,
Aging.
like Mike Shinoda.
Aging is
from
an
Linkin
interesting
Park.
aspect because, like, as we say, jumping back to the aspect of the video games, okay? So how they age well, okay? That's the thing. You
Yeah.
have games which are old as all hell, but they aged extremely gracefully. You know, you have artworks which are old centuries upon centuries, and yet they still today elicit surprise and of even technical abilities, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So you have that, and when you work with art, when you look at art, when you analyze art, one must consider all the sort of aspects. And I don't understand today, for example, the panorama with contemporary art. How in a few centuries we're gonna consider stuff like abstract contemporary art. Okay, the classical. Throw the fucking paint on the wall, see what see what sticks. In comparison to your typical Le Mona Lisa art moment. Okay, that sort of thing. What is gonna stick more? That's the thing. Same thing with video games. There is stuff that is gonna stick less. There's gonna stuff that is gonna stick more, and that's an interesting thing to look at.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a philosopher who really likes to talk about this. Alexander Bard, a Swedish philosopher. I don't like him as a person because he's quite disagreeable and like very edgy, but he talks about the attention economy, and like that's essentially what we're working with. We're not working necessarily with high quality or anything that can last generations, or even years. It's just about like grabbing your attention momentarily, and some things are better at doing that than others. I mean, Charlie Hebdo, like obviously if you're going to do a caricature of Mohammed, like you're going to get all the attention in the world. Just look at what's going on in France right now. It's absolute chaos, and like you have the president who's like a secular liberal going out and say like, I support this work of art. And at the same time, I feel like that's a good quality, like to get a lot of attention, but there's just something about these old gems, like whether it's like Tetris for its amazing gameplay mechanics and just like addictability, or I mean, I can't believe I discovered this game like yesterday. Like I'm seriously in awe how I missed this, but the original Deus Ex game, like holy shit, that game is so fucking good.
And honestly, it's just so much in the thematics which they talk about, exploring. Even though it's more recent, also Human Revolution managed to explore this aspect about humanity and everything. That's the thing. You have these things which, but you end up, those games didn't went to the absolute, I think, in grabbing attention. Okay, today we live in the hype culture, in the at least artistically speaking, the mainstream artist form. So that would be music, and that would be video games. Cinema is slowly being filtered out by TV series, so they're slowly becoming to sort of like they all three, these trifecta: video games, music, and cinema. Not cinema, TV shows. They become affected by a similar slew of issues and problematics. When you make them, and it's a very interesting thing how everything shifted in this aspect, especially the aspect of attention. Okay, you would say it's a good thing, but I wouldn't say so, because I mean, you want attention, just draw a big dick, easy.
Yeah, exactly. Or like do a caricature of a fucking prophet. Speaking on that thing, just like really fast, and then I'll let you like speak. I saw some on my glorious Discord in the listening post. I saw someone posted from Digi Collective this idea of accelerationist art, and like it's really simple. It's just that like in modern technological age, artists can collaborate over the internet, and so you have a lot more connections, but it's not really an accurate term. It's just like it seems to be part of the zeitgeist that things are going faster, and for better and for worse. What do you want to say, AndGeo?
So I wanted to speak on two things because with Deus Ex, you touch on cyberpunk as a genre again, right? And I wanted to say something that I forgot to mention before, in that in Cyberpunk 2077, one thing that at least I haven't seen in other games is how, even to some extent in Cyberpunk, right? There's definitely examples of it, but it's how the city is portrayed, right? You're set into this world, like it's a relatively high population of civilians, and there's just gunfire.
Okay.
And it's even in a, like, remembering back to Human Revolution, right, which is supposed to be, to some extent, like shitty parts of Detroit, it does not have this living world of, yeah, this is a really bad neighborhood. Someone just jumped off a building, right, and died. But that's just the thing I wanted to mention. But the other thing is that we have a really hard time judging what's going to stick around in 100 years from the stuff we do right now, because by living through, the yearly releases, there's this feeling that there's a progress, right? But really, at least in my opinion, shooters have changed, sure, gradually over the last 30 years. But on some level, I feel like, okay, there was Doom, and like Deus Ex also doesn't have very different shooting on some level, right? Then there's like Halo, there's like Call of Duty, and then there was no big steps for 20 years. And I think the one big step that we did see recently was like Doom, Eternal specifically.
Sort of. I mean, for me, Doom is mostly like taking what were already like taking the old school and just giving a new coat of paint, not in regards to graphics, but as I said, in the flow of gameplay. But it's not.
No. I don't agree. I'll tell you why. Because on many levels, right, the speed of the gameplay, the way weapons work, it's nothing particularly new, but the way enemies work, right, the way you fight people, that the fact that a shooter takes more from perhaps, God, what game, like honestly, like maybe Boss Rush, whatever, right, the fact that you have to be efficient in that game, you have to like know all these different weak points of the enemies. For first-person shooters, I think that is a big step forward into doing something different and in making gameplay more enjoyable and challenging. Because for the last 20 years, if you bought any like standard shooter, there were two types of weak points, right? Their heads and like glowing points, and everything else was like shoot and duck, right? Like duck into cover. And I'm glad to see a game, even if like weak points aren't like an insane new invention, right? But use that to take the genre a little bit forward. And I think maybe in 10 years we'll actually have a shooters genre that's more interesting. But
because a lot of these things, like you say, it's actual progress. What I find to be lacking is not necessarily like new elements. It's just like these things that used to make games really fun to play, in my opinion, because they were made for adults. It was the attribute of difficulty, of immersion, and just like having nice story, like a really well thought out story. And like Deus Ex was one of those really like flawless games in that way. But then you have also games like Half-Life that not only did introduce a lot of new mechanics and styles, it was also like a traditional immersive, difficult game. Even being an FPS. And I don't know, I feel like we're slowly getting more simple. And that's just my opinion that I don't like overly simplistic art or games or whatever.
Baroque man, that for sure.
Yeah,
Like I would say that one of the interesting aspects is for me mostly that of all the art forms, so to speak, video games have been subjected to some of the more radical transformations to the way how we interact, approach them, the most frequency of change, so to speak, or at least in a span of time, which in comparison to the other art forms is insane, so to speak. Okay, like pop music essentially remained the same music from the 80s, and paintings and visual arts have been either so elitized that it's a thing of the few, and only a few people, the whole art market, the over-bloated prices for so many paintings and such, and it's a thing that only few people, enjoy, and the rest at best look at stuff from centuries past, which they can understand or at least feel connected to, so to speak. And you have, and even cinema, okay, those things always have limits, but with video games so far, we move towards, there are passive experiences, there are active experiences, there are in-betweens, hybrids, you have new ways of interaction which constantly open up more and more with it, thus opens up the spectrum of interaction with the game. It's because video games are this mixed medium, which is also interactive. It allows for a flexibility which other art forms don't have. So again, we also, but that's an argument for later. But we also have this issue that video games struggle between in a way which similar sort of to music, or in similar sort of to cinema, in which they struggle between being art form and commodity. I don't think you can reconcile the two. I don't think you can reconcile what is art form and what is commodity, and it's a struggle, to maintain the two, at least in my opinion.
Absolutely, and I think it's also important to highlight the difference between just like pure hedonist pleasure seeking from media. I think there's a huge difference between like porn and just general movies, obviously, that maybe has like a sex scene, like that actually adds something to the movie, and it's not just about the pleasure. And what I do think though with these interactive medias, well, I see a problem, right? Because what you're saying, you can't really distinguish between the commodity and the art itself. What I think points more to that direction of it being a commodity, and this sounds really edgy, and it is edgy, but it also is kind of propaganda, like not intentionally, but whatever is the cultural zeitgeist, whatever is the cultural status quo, will be very obvious if you play a modern first person shooter or any kind of story driven game, because they're inherently modernist, they're inherently driven on some kind of narrative. And I don't know, that kind of makes the whole thing for me, that it has a story. There's only been a few games that really try to grapple with the postmodern shit like the Stanley Parable, or even these sandbox games like Garry's Mod, where people make up their own stories and shit, which I think makes it really fun, first of all. But part of the whole thing about art is expressing yourself, and when everything is set on making a sale, a lot of that expression is toned down a lot of the times. And I don't think we'll ever have that pure artistic expression ever again in modern times. But it's probably for better or for worse.
Sort of. I think there's definitely a struggle there between commodity and art, so to speak, or art perception. But yeah. I think that's definitely a thing that will change in the next maybe 50 years. I think it also depends on larger like societal movements, right? If in 20 years we have like World War III, then we're not going to be thinking so hard about like, okay, so I'm in the trench in fucking New Germany or whatever. So, but is a video game art? But the thing is, I do think that we are seeing more. God, I don't know if I want to get into that, right? But like in my view of art, it is largely like elite and institution driven, right? So it's, I think we do see more academics, for example, more gallerists interested in doing something with video games. One big trouble is actually the fact that games are so commercial makes them harder to sell as art, not because of just the pure perception of people like, this is a commodity, right? But because I can't hang up like a copy of Cyberpunk in my gallery because everyone has it, right? It's not like a physical thing that it's the data on it that's important, and the story or whatever. I think in a way, maybe that's also liberatory, right? When we think about the art in these boxes and these files not being tied to a art market and to art institutions.
Yeah, I actually agree. Like, I want to clarify, like, it's mainly video games, I think, where the commodity thing becomes a problem. Because in reality, you have a lot more tools to accurately portray what you want to express. Like, the picture in your head is much easier with modern day tools to come to fruition, especially for people who are doing electronic music and digital art. You can have a near like identical picture from your head. And so I don't think artistic purity is necessarily thrown out of the way. I think, however, I would say that what we're seeing is a lot more focused on like not sellability, but again, what we touched upon earlier, this like what grabs your attention. And it's really unfortunate. Like, and I'm going to bring up the perfect example for this. Well, it's a horrible example, but Spotify's new algorithm has made it so that you can buy in the past it used to be that you could, for a limited period of time, make yourself the number one artist, and Drake did that. So all the recommended stuff was just Drake albums. But for the Discover Weekly function on Spotify, where you get new artists, so people would have thousands of new artists every year, which is really nice. That can be purchased, so you are discoverable in the algorithm. And so if money buys attention, then that kind of kills the point, I think, of art for the sake of art. But it's only subjective anyways. Like, most people like what's popular. So like, who am I to say that's bad? It's just like, personally, it's a negative thing.
I mean, money buys attention goes to the thing that it's true, because otherwise marketing wouldn't exist as a thing. And for example, imagine how much money was spent in marketing for how much money is spent in marketing for video games, okay, in comparison to movies, okay. I think that a lot of the budget, considering how much, considering that in regards to how much money it makes, video games surpass the movies and music in regards to being the biggest money maker in the entertainment industry. And a lot of money is poured into marketing. Mm-hmm. Marketing is itself, uses the art form, uses the attention aspect of the art form to its maximum. So popularity is manufactured, That's true. It's something which of course, it bases itself upon a study of what people like, in a way, okay, so to speak. What people like, because you can make people like a thing, you can make people dislike a thing. It's based upon dedicating resources to a certain thing and pushing that thing, and knowing if it hits certain buttons, certain demographics, and if you push it more and more, it becomes mainstream.
Yeah, and what you were saying earlier, AndGeo, about this like liberatory aspect of everything becoming like data, not tied to physical and material objects necessarily, but there's a global access to almost all information. I think that's a fantastic thing. One of the few things I really like about like modern day capitalism, how it produces this like instant access to a lot of data. I think like
that's not what I meant, right?
That's not what you meant. It's just, what I feel is good about like this sort of not instant gratification, but like instant access to these devices is that, that's what I want to touch upon. That this art itself is a liberatory experience. You're able to, in the midst of all this chaos, like find some point of calm, point of creativity, and like individuality in a way that doesn't feel forced. And well, it's not hard to, but as an artist, like that's really something you cherish, at least for me personally. Like it really impacts the way I make stuff. Like I don't want to work with a producer that tells me do this, do that, because we got to tailor to this audience or that audience. Just to be able to draw something on a piece of paper and say, I made this. I didn't think about what would happen. It just came out the way it felt right. And this approach is something that a lot of artists will brag about. They'll say like, well, we make stuff for ourselves. Like if we like it, then we publish it. And if others don't like it, well, that's good for them. But, we just do it for ourselves. Like that's obviously not true for a lot of modern rock bands like Arctic Monkeys or whatever. It's just like, I think it is possible to do that. And the question is, do most people really want that? I don't think authenticity is valued in modern day society in the way that it was in the past. And that's just what it is, unfortunately.
Boomer talk.
I mean, yeah, I'm a fucking boomer at this point, like conservative in most people's eyes saying stuff like this. But like, it's obvious, right? Like if you look at what most people are posting on social media, the average person is kind of, for lack of a better word, like fake. And at least on social media. I don't know how they are in real life, but you don't get to talk to them that much anymore, I feel.
Well, I think there's some truth to this, definitely. But I think also from just a work perspective, right? Mm-hmm. That maybe we tie up quality with acceptance a little bit too much. Perhaps that's it, right? Because when an artist works on like their album, or when I work on a picture for Instagram or whatever, mm-hmm. right? Then, okay, maybe I'm a bad example because I do just sometimes shit out stuff because I enjoy it. But when someone makes something, obviously they're somewhat invested with what people think about it, right? God, dude, it's just very hard to really distinguish between just being accepted because of a general mood and because of something is authentic or quality or whatever. But generally you work on something and you find that, okay, maybe this part isn't going to be popular because maybe it's bad, right? So you change it. It's a complicated process.
It is a complicated process. And I mean, ultimately, whatever we say or labels we put on stuff, like it is, I mean, it feels almost forced saying it, but it is subjective. And like, that's a thing a lot of people still have a problem with accepting, ironically, even though they say, I like what's popular. I listen to pop music. I see the latest movies or whatever. It's like, well, it doesn't mean it's good. Like you like that. So the question becomes like, why does it matter if art is good or bad? Like, I don't think, honestly, if I'm completely honest, like I've said in the past, I don't think art as like an idea or concept is even real materially. It's just like a subjective experience, and that can be very important. But like, what is the limits of that subjectivity, I guess?
I think that's a good that's a good point, because it is
Good to segue to the next topic.
because the subjectivity and objectivity, so to speak, to sort of duality, to sort of encounter. It's a complex relationship, especially in an age in which there is so much information, so much stuff, so much, because so much people have access to distribute and the tools to create that sort of thing. And that's why you have so much garbage, so proportionally to the good stuff. Okay, that's the thing. It's garbage. Okay, it's stuff which is either copying something, copying it badly, and even, or it's just attempts at garnering attention. There is a lot of that stuff, and art is a subjective thing, of course, but at the same time, this subjectivity, you said it good, the limits of this subjectivity, how we can consider what is good, what is bad. There is, it sort of depends from person to person, but at least in my opinion, there must be at least certain, standards. Otherwise, might as well accept any fucking buggy game just because it has pretty graphics.
That's a good point, because not everything needs to be this pure authentic, for you to enjoy it. I don't think hedonism is necessarily bad or whatever. That's a philosophical question, but it's just it's okay to be a mixed medium. I think The Joker is a good example of that. It has some of the best fucking music a movie has ever had, in my opinion. There's a reason she won an Oscar for that music for 2 movies actually. And it's just really good. The cinematography is great. It's just it's not that deep. And does it need to be deep? I don't really care, honestly. I enjoyed it, and it had an impact on me. And I think maybe people take themselves too seriously, with these numbers. I really despise it. I've complained about it multiple times, but the numbering of Metacritic or any of these websites, this is a 10, this is a 9, it doesn't matter. Did you like it or not? That's the information I want to have as a consumer of a video game. It had the very good gameplay. It's a 7 out of 10. But what does that mean? It's in an age where information is abundant, omnipresently. Why do we put everything down into little atomized boxes of good, bad, 7, 6? It's not necessary, and it dismisses the complexity and the depth, the wealth of subjective experiences. And so I think that is the limitation. You cannot put a number on a subjective experience and expect everyone else to understand what that means. And I think there's also this aspect of, you can kind of tell, most people, normies, empathetic people, can kind of tell if someone is not being really true to themselves. And that probably takes away from the believability of what they're doing. You need to suspend the disbelief. And even though these games, because they were so weird, glitchy, not necessarily glitchy, but very clunky in a way, a lot of these games, they had the immersion, and they really succeeded to suspend the disbelief. And I think we put way too much pressure on the consumer to understand all the fucking neurons firing in their heads and have to justify why you like something. It's okay to just like something. Whatever happened to that? Just that was a good movie. That's my opinion. That simple as that, really.
No, I need validation. I need internet validation by defeating you and saying what you should like and how you should like it. Yeah, it's true. But again, you also have to deal with the aspect of mediocrity too, okay? A lot of people like mediocre stuff, which objectively mediocre, so to speak, because there are standards, there are objective standards you can judge something to a certain degree. Maybe not extremely universals. Nothing is truly universal.
I agree.
But, there is a well-shot movie. You understand when there is a well-shot movie.
Yes.
Some games, you might find... but, for example, if a movie is shot really badly, but it can have an excellent story, everything. There are many factors to consider, but at the same time, have some standards. Okay, that's the thing. Set yourself some standards. At least, I think that also enters in regards to consideration of the self. Okay, what you like reflects on what you are in a certain situation. Yeah. Maybe I'm a little judgmental bastard. So yeah.
let me throw a wrench into the whole concept of this episode and say, it's like, first of all, like, Maestro is somewhat correct, right? Like I think, like, all my friends, right, regardless of them being like great philosophers or not, right, I do think that there's a value in perhaps, like as an example, right, like read some canon works, right, in literature, right? That's probably good, even if you don't have to enjoy all of them, right? There's nothing bad in acquiring good taste. Yeah. But at the same time, if a friend of mine is, he doesn't read much, he likes to go party, like great guy, very friendly, very like understanding in many things, very intuitive person too. So it's not that, like, really he isn't stupid, even though he sometimes thinks of himself as that. But
he's not talking about himself, don't worry.
Yeah. He kind of, it's like, if I suggested to him, read like the Iliad, even if he decided to do that, there's a good chance that he wouldn't get much out of it.
That's true.
And you know what? That's ultimately all this art shit.
Yeah.
Ain't that important, dude.
I mean, yeah,
like it's all good and enriches your life. But at the end of the day, if you can take a shower and go outside and get some pussy, that's also okay.
See, that's a good point. I think it's good to have this sort of balanced view. I really despise this whole, like, a lot of modern fucking, like, commies or fascists or whatever, like, especially some really, like, autistic communists like to say that, well, art doesn't matter at all. We're just going to strip all the cultural benefits. And it's just like, they don't understand the consequences of doing that, because if you completely undervalue art, you're completely draining that, like, really good energy from a lot of hardworking, sensitive people in society. And so, like, sure, it might not matter philosophically that much, but it adds a lot of value to people's lives. And so I think that's the most important part, what it adds to our lives. And for me, it adds a lot. And I would like to work with art for the rest of my life. But I'm not saying it's, like, objectively the best thing for anything really, other than, like, my own and my friends' enjoyment. What I do think, though, touching upon something you said there a bit, like, yeah, he doesn't understand the value in this, like, great piece of, like, literature or whatever it is that you present to him. And maybe that's good. Maybe exclusivity is, like, a good thing. I think, like, we don't need to have, like, imagine if everyone, it's not this, like, classical, well, what if everyone just was the same? It's like, well, obviously that's not going to happen, but, like, and not everyone needs to know all these references. Not everyone needs to fucking be a philosopher or a politician or whatever. Like, what I really want to, like, highlight in this is, I think it's good if people can be authentic and true to themselves and not succumb to the, like, internet, like, hate storm of just pointing out things negatively just because it, like, gets you attention. Like, that's a Reddit problem of, like, people being extremely disagreeable because it's, like, against the grain in a way. But I don't think a lot of these critics are really sincere. And I have a good example of that. So my father's an artist, and he made a song, or an interpretation of a song, and it's a folk song. And the critic was like, this man cannot sing a false tone, and I don't like it. It's like, my dad did here was that he sang the song too good for it to be authentically folk. So imagine then, right, if he took that and started singing false notes or like sloppy, how would that be better than just like singing it the way that feels good to you and is true to you? And they got like, the guy got shit for saying that because he said it in the broader context of like really criticizing it. And he got so fucked up from doing that. But like that really goes to show that some people really tune into that negativity, and it's no longer about what they actually think or like to do justice to art. It's just like, I don't know. It's like you said, Maestro. Some people, it's not just what you like that makes you who you are. It's also what you dislike. And I don't know. I think that's not necessarily a good thing, even though it is what it is. But these critics and mass producing, creating a sort of cultured individual that knows about all these references and has good taste, I think that's something that we should like really take with a grain of salt, because it doesn't really exist. Everyone has their weird tastes or whatever. There maybe are good standards we can apply to single works, but I don't think there's any person in the world who has like objectively good taste all across the board.
Exactly. You gotta be yourself. Remember the motto. Be yourself.
It's a very hard balance to strike, right? It's perfect moderation is almost impossible. I do think that, this good taste, like person that knows the canon and something fucking fell in my kitchen. Fuck.
Okay.
Like that person does exist, I think. I mean, but ultimately, like if I can talk about myself in that way in a very limited sense, right? Like I've played video games like you guys, like for hundreds of hours, right? And I know that in shooters, just the bullet firing and hitting in a certain way, just like, ooh, chef's kiss. This is great. And I think if you talk about like a quote unquote silly subject such as video games, it instantly becomes more silly to say something like that.
Yeah.
Like, this is the thing that makes a video game good or bad to you. It's like, yes. I think the truth about like kind of the art elite is that they also have like a lot of the things that they like are pretty silly. And maybe if they approached people more on that silly note, or on that like sincere love for a certain thing, rather than just the thing you get from a professor or a lecture, or someone in a gallery. It's like, yes, this is the Kandinsky painting number 17, and it's such an amazing constructivist piece. Kandinsky is my favorite artist, so it must be true. But like my reason for loving Kandinsky is pretty silly, right? It's Yeah,
you raise a really good point, and that's like, I think honestly, this person exists in everyone to a certain extent, especially if you're more sensitive of a person. You're going to see patterns the way other people don't see them, and they're there. It's just like you have your own value of that specific thing. And like realistically, not everyone is going to know references, but there's always something that someone is going to learn about and really enjoy. And so I think like to really cherish something, to be a stan, to highlight Eminem here a bit, that's perfectly fine. Like I would like that. I would like for people to sincerely like things instead of trying to fit in and just be yourself. Like Maestro said, like that would be really nice, because like I don't trust critics. I don't trust anything until I play it myself anymore. Like these standards, while like I really enjoy watching Gordon Ramsay have like spurgouts over like people burning, little things here and there. Like realistically, like you're not gonna be able to see this in the average person, and I wouldn't want that. Special interests are fine. General interest and mediocre things are fine. But like I think I have to agree with you ultimately, Maestro. There are standards. It's undeniable. Like once you burnt a steak, it's burnt. It's not good, you know. And this is also the case with video games. If it's glitchy, it's glitchy. Like you just fucked up. It's harder to do that with art, like with like music and paintings. But there is still the element there as well.
Yeah,
well, maybe you know,
like it's moralizing. Okay, it's a bit, you know, uppity. It's a bit preachy, but I want people to enjoy good stuff. Okay, to you know, to have better, to develop, you know, what they like. You know, because people like good things. People like a good meal. Okay, people like a good art piece. And the thing is, using and perverting what was already perverted by Steve Jobs, but be hungry, be foolish, okay? That's the thing. It's pure fucking cringy, which you would hear like at those motivation video or such. God. But demand for more for yourself.
Absolutely.
That's the thing. Okay, that's even when in video games, people get way too easily satisfied. Jumping back to what we started, Cyberpunk, at least in my opinion, it could have added more. It could have been more. But people are gonna be pacified because they've got their fucking shiny AAA title game instead of, you know, maybe they could have decided to, I don't know, guys, we can make something new, you know, insert a unique new mechanic which can change how RPGs work, you know, because RPGs evolve weirdly enough. And maybe we could also think about making a bit of a better management work, because I think this is a point also that video games as an art form is a collective effort, much more than an individual effort, which was considered before, so to speak. It's effort made by a community, even when a game is made by a single person. Even then, the resources available on the internet, which the person certainly used, are like, it's rare to see projects, and those mostly are experimental, more in the lieu of traditional art, when somebody makes a game completely out of scratch, the coding and everything. And plus, games as an artwork evolve because they are a collective work. There are multiple visions in it, and they evolve. And that's one of their strong, unique points. So again, that can be applied to the cinema too, honestly speaking.
To add on that, like, sincerely, everything in society, if we would just demand the impossible, we would see more progress. And this goes out to our listeners. If you think we ramble on too much about uninteresting shit, you can criticize the shit out of us. Just like make sure it's actually, you know, real criticism that comes from your heart and not from your dick, you know, like keep it real. And I guess that's it. That's all I have to say for this episode.
You know, there's one last thing that I want to kind of reel it back maybe a little bit, because like I said, right, I do want people, I do think that 90% of like everyone, you know, could develop a taste, for example, that's closer to the elites, right? Because that could appreciate the big works. Like I think most people, right, this is straight out of Hobbes's Leviathan, right? Like most people are not that different, right? Sure, there's differences, but it's like, come on.
We have more in common than we have differences.
Yeah. But at the same time, you know, people are at different spaces, and I'd like to paraphrase a friend of mine on this, that if, you know, if you like listening to a boy group, right, like One Direction, and that's definitely not my kind of music.
Absolutely
right?
Not,
I think like for me they're very boring. But if like people shouldn't think that they're too good for it, right? Because if you are in a certain spot and you listen to their music and it gives you something, like that genuine feeling of this speaks to me is probably, I'm pretty sure, more important than everyone else criticizing like the boy group for being maybe too corporate or whatever, right? Like, even if you get it like from the fucking I don't know who's a very like agreed like bad artist, right? Nickelback or whatever. Like get something.
I've gotten it better. Imagine Dragons.
Yes, right. Like, if you get something from it, that's the important part, right? So what Maestro said, right? Like, be yourself, right? Be like, get something out of it, but do strive to be better.
Yeah, and you can absolutely demand things from artists, and specifically like, well, the companies to produce commodities that you buy with your hard-earned money. Like, you know, at work, you don't get treated like shit. When you go to like a fucking McDonald's, you don't want trash food, you complain. So you can complain all you want. It's just like, yeah, I think if you really think about the things that you really like about something and you point that out, you don't have to be a yes man.
Yeah, don't just react, you know, reflect.
Yeah, don't just react. And like, it's really not good yes men either. Sometimes I fall into that trap of being too positive. I think perhaps it's a little bit better in being too negative, but in general, like, you can just say what you like about something, what you don't like about something, and just keep it like that forever. I don't like this idea that you cannot take risks, that you have to censorship. I hate it. Like, that's, if anything, that we could take from art, because this is what philosophers been doing all the time, like trying to extract some wisdom from art. But it's that, like, see what happens when you try to filter out the stuff that comes out, besides like individual taste. If you remove the ability to produce nudity in something, if you remove curse words, and see how annoying that is, and try to figure out why is that so fucking annoying. Well, it's probably because that's not what the author intended it to be. And honestly, this whole death of the author, like, it's a meme, and like, everything is subjective, and it's about like the subjective interpretation. But at least, like, keep it like that. Then keep it the way that it was produced originally, and then we can talk. Because what's going on right now with the EU trying to censor memes, and the talks of like, we have to adapt to Islamic sensitivities, no, you can absolutely stand up for like secular society, like freedom to express and all this shit. Like, that's what I want to see. That's what we could really demand from politicians, from producers, to not give in to mob rule. And that's perhaps the one little Pseud wisdom I could extract from today's conversation.
True. And I think we extracted a bit of pearls here and there. It was productive, I would say. Yeah. It was as productive as trying to see our other episodes, and, you know, maybe buying our merch. That's also very productive. You know, people. Guys, I do hope, listeners, you enjoy the episode. I certainly did enjoy the talk. I was a bit today off there, you know, a bit. My mind wasn't full into it, so I do apologize for the lackluster performance. But not worry, little Pseud bandit that listens. We have a special episode in the comics for you. For the season is merry, and is happy. So remember to share, listen to it on wherever we post it, on YouTube, on SoundCloud. Maybe in the future we're actually gonna have the infrastructures, you know, to expand to other platforms like iTunes, bro, on the Apple stores, but that's maybe in the future. But also remember to visit our site, Leftyband. .org. You see, I visited so often that I know, like, if you want to see articles, various cool stuff, then we highly suggest to visit that site. And gentlemen, it was an honor being with you on this episode. It is Maestro, the touring cop, signing off.
I want to also say that, you know, It's okay. I was all over the place this episode as well. I mean, just look at the introduction. I barely even introduced you guys. How are you doing, by the way, before we end this episode? Are you doing okay?
I'm glad you're asking.
I signed off. I'm dead. Ego death.
All right. Well, if you want to have more clear-cut analysis, you can check out the blogs. Also, like Maestro said. But until next time, is there anything you want to say to end off?
Yes,
AndGeo?
well, first of all, it was fun to be on here again, talking about pornography a lot less this time. I think there's a lot more that we could talk about, but we should keep it somewhat concise. And it was fun being here. It was fun being here, and leftyband.org and on Redbubble. We're also on Redbubble.
Oh, we are? Okay.
I mean, we are because the shop on the website is gone and it only redirects to the.
Oh god, dude! Yeah, I really fucked up with that one. One day.
When am I getting those stickers, bro?
That's been all for Pseud Central today.
Yeah, okay. I see. I'm being ignored. I'm never getting those stickers.
I'm gonna personally deliver them to you. Don't worry about it.
Based.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.